Friends, we gather together this morning to celebrate the life and to honor the memory of Eugenia Vainberg. Eugenia's family so very much appreciates your presence, those of you who are here with us, and the presence of those of you who are live streaming from, as I understand it, around the world. Your presence both here and throughout the world offers the family a great deal of comfort and support. We very much appreciate your presence here with us. Adonai ma'adam v'teda ehu ben enosh v'tchashvehu. O Lord, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you are mindful of us? We are like a breath, our days are as a passing shadow. We come and we go like grass, which in the morning shoots up renewed, in the evening it fades and it withers. You cause us to turn to dust, saying, return, you mortal creatures. Would that we were wise, that we understood whither we are going. For when we die, we carry nothing away. Our glory does not accompany us. Mark the wholehearted and behold the upright. They shall have peace. The author of the first of the Bible's 150 Psalms describes for us in language that is both poignant and succinct the nature of the good life and the fruits of that life. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked, nor taken the path of sinners, nor joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. Let us take comfort now together in the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Kohelet, the author of the biblical book of Ecclesiastes, reminds us that for everything there is a season, a time for every experience under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Eugenia Vainberg died peacefully early this past Tuesday evening at the age of 94. She lived a long and an eventful life, a life filled with pain, with suffering, and with loss, as well as a life filled with pleasure, with gratification, and with discovery. And while the pain never left her, the darkness of those early years was always present, her daughter Maria told me. Eugenia was determined to savor all the joys of life and all that life can offer us. Eugenia was born on January 20th, 1928, in a shtetl named Idetslav in the Ukraine. At a young age, she moved to Kiev to live with her formidable father, who was a scientist and an engineer and a founder of the Institute of Civil Engineering in that city. Eugenia was always an excellent student and became the valedictorian of her class. She attended the Kiev Polytechnical Institute, where she received her engineering degree and where she also received gold medals for excellence as a student. After graduating, she worked as an engineer and a computer programmer for the Kiev TV station. Tragically, life had another side for Eugenia and her family, for they were victims of the Stalin purges during the 1930s. Two of her uncles were arrested and executed in Moscow's infamous Lubyanka prison, and her beloved father was arrested and tortured, though thankfully he survived. And while Eugenia had an opportunity to immigrate to America earlier than she did, in fact, she stayed behind in order to protect her father, eventually migrating to Cleveland in 1977 at the age of 49. Once she arrived in Cleveland, Eugenia found work as an abstracts editor for a database forecasting company where she worked for 12 years. Now, those of us who knew Eugenia well know what an extraordinary person she was. First of all, she had a vibrant and creative spirit, grounded as it was in her knowledge of and her deep love for the great art and poetry and music and theater of her native Russian culture. And her immersion in this wondrous culture continually stimulated her own creativity. Now, already as a child, Eugenia had developed her skills in embroidery, though after childhood, she had put this craft aside, not to be reclaimed until she had retired from her work. But at that point, her artistry blossomed, and she created one after another potent portraits of well-known Russian masters. And there is more, for she focused on these great figures, not only to give them artistic form, but also as a way to educate those who viewed her work about the geniuses of 20th century, 19th and 20th century Russian culture. Indeed, wherever she met people, or wherever people happened by while she was working on a particular piece, Eugenia would invariably take that opportunity to tell them about the person she was depicting. Her creations, in other words, things of beauty in their own right, also served her desire not to allow the glories of Russian culture be pushed aside or forgotten. And Eugenia was always learning, always hungry for knowledge. She attended senior college at the Case Western Reserve University for more than 30 years, never missing a class, always stitching while she listened attentively. And during classroom breaks, she took every opportunity to tell curious individuals what she was creating and why. And people were always curious about this quiet, lovely, and devoted woman who could simultaneously concentrate on the lecturer's words and on her own creative activity. And when someone told her that old age is no joy, Eugenia's reply was that old age is a joy, for it is then that we have precious opportunities to meet new people and engage in the activities that the bustle of middle age does not fully allow. Now, I myself knew Eugenia fairly well. She attended our Shabbat morning Torah study classes at the temple for many years. And in my mind's eye, I can see her even now, sitting at the end of one of the tables next to her beloved friend, Lamar Richardson. There she was, her eyes fully focused on her embroidery, while from time to time she lifted her head toward me. That showed me that she had been all along paying close attention to the conversation. And very occasionally, she would do something that deeply touched me. Now, most people, when they have a comment to offer or a question to raise, would simply lift their hand, raise their hand, in order to be called upon. This was the standard and wholly acceptable way to do it. Not for Eugenia. Yes, she would begin by raising her hand, and so I called on her. But rather than remaining in her chair, she would stand up, slowly, regally, and fully erect. And then, with focus and with consummate gentleness, she would ask her question or make her point. Having done so, she would sit down again and continuing her embroidering. And in those few moments, she presented an image that I will never forget. And along the way, she and I would talk about composers whom we both loved. Franz Schubert often entered our exchanges. And then one day, she presented a fully formed, embroidered portrait of that singular composer as a gift for my office at the temple. Needless to say, that portrait quickly became one of my most precious possessions. To this day, it has a special place on the wall next to the door so that I can see it when I come in and when I go out. Something cherishable from a cherished friend. Eugenia Vainberg is survived by her daughter Maria and by her son Alex, by her son-in-law Jonathan, and by her daughter-in-law Sheila, by her grandchildren Daniel and Stephanie, David and Aaron, Michael, Leah, and Ben, and by her sister Mifa, by her niece Marina, and by many adoring friends and family from around the world. Now, among the many moving messages sent to Maria after her mother's death, there is one that seems to me to capture something of the essence of Eugenia Vainberg. And so I want to conclude my remarks with this tribute. Eugenia was a singular woman, self-educated, creative, independent, and focused. We are so grateful that she graced our lives with her joyful spirit. She taught us much about unconditional love and kindness, what it means to be a true friend, and how to live fully in the moment. Zichrona livracha. The memory of Eugenia Vainberg will always be our blessing. Amen. I want now to call on several people, one at a time, who will reflect on the life, the qualities, the accomplishments of Eugenia Vainberg. First of all, her son-in-law, Jonathan Litt.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Jonathan, Maria's husband and Eugenia's son-in-law. I knew Eugenia since 1979 and would like to provide a few observations. Eugenia really got around. It seemed that everyone we encountered knew her. Often it turned out that our friends had somehow met her, but it was also not uncommon to meet strangers at an event who, after some conversation regarding accents and background, would look quizzically at Maria and say, "Are you Eugenia's daughter? I love your mother." That was the thing about her. Whenever someone, even just her acquaintance, mentioned her to Maria, they would say, "I love your mother." She knew so many people from all different walks of life and was able to connect people who would not have met otherwise. Maria and I certainly made several wonderful contacts this way. But it wasn't just that she knew a lot of people. She had so many long-time, deeply devoted friends. For the past few months, when Maria started monitoring and responding to her voicemail, there were usually several messages per day from people wanting to catch up. And when we were cleaning out her independent living apartment as she was preparing to move to assisted living, I came across boxes and boxes of cards and letters from friends. But I think it was really demonstrated by the constant stream of people visiting her in the hospital up until the last day. She was trained as an engineer in the Soviet Union, but in the United States she had a business card printed that identified her as a Russian teacher, interpreter, translator, and embroiderer, which is probably how most people knew her. I think it was her embroidery that initiated many of her friendships. She was prolific and liked to embroider while sitting in public places, such as on park benches. People would wander by and ask her about the unusual designs, which got them talking, and a long-term relationship often ensued. Embroidery was her passion, but she was not just a hobbyist or dilettante. She knew all about the subjects of her work and the history of the art movements she assimilated. And she was successful. She was involved in many solo and group shows and was even represented by a gallery. But you know all of that. As I said, embroidery was what she was best known for. Around Judson Park, where she lived, she was also known as the orchid doctor, and people would bring her their orchids once they stopped blooming. Eugenia never stopped learning, and she was delighted to share what she knew with others. In the past few days, many people told us about the impact this had on their lives. I want to conclude with some examples that Maria provided from her own life. The following are excerpts from a rather maudlin essay entitled "I Owe My Mother Everything" that Maria wrote in honor of Eugenia's birthday in 2009, but certainly appropriate for this occasion. So now this is Maria's words. "Besides my life, I owe my mother everything else. She and I are not into public testimonials, but often when we talk, I say, 'Everything is from you, vsie от тебя,' and she knows what I mean. No explanation is needed. For those who do not know, however, I will list a few things just to give some idea of what I mean. One of my earliest memories is walking with my mother in the wintry evenings on the streets of Kiev with snow sparkling in the light of street lamps. After her day of work, my mother would take a stick and draw letters and words in the snow. That's how I learned to read. I must have been about 4 then. I owe my mother for my love of math. Another early memory around that age is when I would be already in bed with the lights out. I would ask my mother, just one more little problem, and she would give me another arithmetic or algebra problem, which I loved to solve. I owe my mother for my love of Russian poetry and literature. When I was little, she recited poems to me. I used to write them down from memory to make sure I remembered them. So did my mother, as she later told me. I owe my mother for my love of art and nature. The hours spent together at Shaker Lakes and the Cleveland Botanical Garden are unforgettable. She taught me not just to look, but to see and notice things. I use this in my photography. I owe my mother for my passion for orchids before they became widely available. She gave me a couple of white Phalaenopsis orchids, and even though they were too far gone, I learned how to take care of them and was successful in reblooming subsequent ones year after year. I owe my mother for another little hobby that became a serious addiction, namely knitting. A few years ago, a friend invited me to a knitting class just to see if I liked it. The instructor demonstrated to us how to make a knit stitch, and off we went. However, I did not do it the way I was shown, which is how people in the UK and US knit. I was knitting the continental way, the way my mother had shown me when I was a very little girl. I forgot it completely, but my fingers did not. Now we can do our crafts side by side, she embroidering, I knitting. Of course, she is an artist, and I can only attempt to emulate her, even though we are not alike, and the two crafts are very different. They both teach patience and how to put things in perspective. Finally, I owe my mother for my younger brother. I love you, Mama. Thank you.
Eugenia's grandson, Michael Litt.
When I was growing up, I didn't hear many details about my grandmother's difficult past. Most people who met her in the time I knew her would not have guessed that she had been through so much because she was such a warm, genuine, and kind person. This past week in particular, I've learned a great deal about my grandma Eugenia's life from before I was born, and what struck me the most was how, once she started a new chapter of her life in America, she fully embraced her new circumstances. When she moved to Cleveland, it wasn't a straightforward transition. She struggled with the language barrier and deep cultural differences. Nevertheless, she worked hard to learn English and with time became an adored member of her new community. In the Soviet Union, it was illegal for Eugenia to practice her Judaism. In Cleveland, she dove into it. She was a Torah study student for a decade at the temple and volunteered at the Jewish Family Service for years. Eugenia loved nature, frequently visiting the Shaker Lakes Nature Center and also actively contributing to and tending to her community garden. Her passion for nature is evident in her art. In retirement, she turned her old embroidery hobby into a fully fledged career as an artist. She was generous with her embroideries and often made them as gifts for her friends, family, and neighbors. When I look back at the time I spent with her, I'll remember staring at the walls of her apartment, which were covered completely with her art. I'll also remember how, in more recent years, when I visited her at Judson, there would sometimes be a stream of visitors filing in and out of her apartment. Through her involvement in her community, which she adopted after finding herself transplanted in Cleveland, she made a mark on so many people, many of whom are here today, and many, many more who could not be here. I hope to emulate my grandma by remembering to live my life to the fullest, stopping to appreciate the beauty around me, and not shying away from making new connections. From Eugenia, we can all learn to never let adversity get in the way of living a fulfilling life and being a positive force in the world.
Eugenia's friend, Debbie Applepresser.
Every Monday at 10 a.m., I showed up at Musicians Towers, then Judson, to embroider with Eugenia. Along with embroidering, we got to know each other rather quickly. We talked about art, music, Eugenia's love for poetry, the Russian classics, our families, and our lives. At times, Eugenia would recite poems in Russian, then English, followed by our thoughts. She would tell me stories, or soap operas, as she would call it, about the iconic people she embroidered. One of my favorites was Eugenia's design that she thought Martha Stewart should have on her ankle bracelet after she got out of prison. Besides our classical music concerts, lectures, and other outings, we had what I would call our Eugenia adventures. One day, as we walked back into Eugenia's apartment, there was commotion from the apartment next door. People were packing up the apartment. Eugenia asked me to go in and pull all the nails out of the walls so she could use them to hang her embroideries. As she said this to me, she walked away. Okay, I thought, it looks like maintenance people doing work in there. So in I went and started pulling nails out of the wall until I happened upon some people who had this look on their face of, who are you and what the hell are you doing in here? I left and told Eugenia that was her family in there as I handed her 3 nails. She laughed. Eugenia seemed to have a revolving door to her apartment. At times she would say, so-and-so is coming by. I hope you don't mind. I said, okay, but I was thinking, what, during our embroidery time together? But the people I met were such wonderful and interesting people. It was a pleasure to meet Eugenia's circle of friends and get to know Maria better. I could go on and on. Eugenia was a treasure. I learned so much from her. She was my friend, confidant, and partner in adventures. Eugenia was loved by my family and friends. Our age difference did not exist. We always said that we felt like 2 schoolgirls giggling in the corner together. I can't say thank you enough, Eugenia, for all that we shared in our 15 years together.
Eugenia's friend, Oleg Targoni.
Thank you. It's hard to start. I don't think I need to tell you about Eugenia because all of you know her, and a lot of it was said already here. I met Eugenia shortly after I moved to this country to work at Case Western Reserve University, and since then, almost every week we would meet to talk in her apartment, and those of you who knows Eugenia, it's never just to talk, it's also food involved. And that lasted for 27 years. Well, needless to say, so during that time, Eugenia learned a lot about my life in details. But one day, approximately a year ago, when she was still in good health, she surprised me by recalling one episode in my life that We didn't spoke probably for 15 years, naming names of people involved. And I was astounded. I asked, how come you remember this? I barely even remember. And she said, because I listen. Well, we all have ability to hear, but not everybody has ability to truly listen. She was the one who could listen. She had interest in every person she met. And that is something that I really cherished in her. As human beings, we are all unique, but not everybody is special. Eugenia was special. We have a friend of mine who lives abroad and who shares mutual adoration with Eugenia. She wrote that Cleveland, and that friend would come visiting in Cleveland. She said that without Eugenia, Cleveland wouldn't be the same. I can add to it. Without Eugenia, my life and life of her friends wouldn't be the same.
Finally, Eugenia's niece, Marina Kaufman.
Hello, I'm Eugenia's niece. I stand here for myself, for my mother Mifa, and for my daughter Nikki, the 3 generations of women who have loved her and admired her since the day we were born. I also stand here for my husband Leon and Nikki's husband Jared, and little Ellie, who would have loved to have known her. My mom couldn't be here, but she asked me first to read a few words from her. Our lives, mine and Eugenia's, were so intertwined that I cannot imagine my life without her. She was an absolutely incredible woman. She went through so many trials and obstacles in her life that sometimes it was difficult to believe that she would prevail. But she was a winner. She prevailed. She overcame. Eugenia loved people and helped them, and people responded. She was loved and respected by so many of different people of different ages, backgrounds, and religions. She went and took with her such a large layer of my life. There is nobody I can ask about our grandparents or our parents when they were young. There is nobody who remembers me as a toddler, teenager, or a young girl. But I will always remember your courage, your perseverance, your kindness, and your smile. I will always remember you. My Eugenia, моя сестричка, моя мусенька. And now this is from me and Nikki. Eugenia was unique in her Birkenstocks, which she had more than a few pairs of, in her flowing muumuu dresses and a wide-rimmed straw hat, with her canvas bag containing the embroidery she was currently working on. She seamlessly fitted into any group and environment she was a part of. It could be a numerous art and conversation groups at Judson, or a literary circle dissecting Thomas Mann's and James Joyce novels. It could be a celebration at Coventry's institution Tommy's, the restaurant that showcased her works. It could be yet another exhibition of her needlepoint paintings in one of the galleries. Or she could simply be sitting at the bench by her favorite lake with her face turned up to the sun, talking to a stranger, invariably holding embroidery in her hands. She was quirky. She was eccentric. My daughter considered her cool and hip. in the best of hippie ways. To us, she was Musa, or Teta Musa, and this encompassed everything. Eugenia was the least judgmental person that I have ever known. She was completely devoid of prejudice. Hers was the presumption of goodness. Any person was assumed to be good until proven otherwise. Any person proven otherwise would be given another chance, and then another, and then one more chance until they got it right. And most of the time, they did. Not because she was weak-principled. She had beliefs that she never betrayed. It was simply one of her beliefs that everybody had goodness in them. She always knew her identity. A Jewish immigrant born in Kiev, whose relatives perished in Babi Yar. For our family, she started the exodus from the former Soviet Union, alone with 2 children. We are here because of her. Being Jewish was crucial to her. She was bat mitzvahed in her late 80s and given the Hebrew name of Esther. She knew a lot about Judaism, but always wanted to learn more. She was always part of a group learning something new, always expanding her horizons. When it came to helping people, which was her basic instinct, conventions were disregarded. She would not hesitate to call a stranger on behalf of another stranger at the most inconvenient time if the person was in need. She helped so many, people from different walks of life, of all races, religions, and backgrounds. Sometimes people would forget her kindness and move on, using her as a stepping ladder. This did not matter to her. What always warmed my heart when I thought about Teta Musa was the knowledge that even if she had known that the person would fail her in the future, she would still help this person, because this is what this person needed at the moment. And in the end, acknowledgement came to her. Many years later, I heard from somebody who attended the same severance concert as my aunt. During the intermission, people kept coming to her seat as she was sitting in the chair doing her embroidery, accepting them as if she were royalty. And this is how it should have been, because selflessness and kindness conquers all. Her hospitality was out of this world. Sometimes there was a lot of food in her fridge, sometimes not. But whatever she had, she would put it all on the table, be it 1 tomato cut 3 ways or a lavish dinner. And I cannot tell you how good everything tasted when served from the heart. Speaking about breaking bread, she was the most democratic person I've ever known. She treated paupers and princes in the same friendly way, with good nature and curiosity. I'm convinced that should a king have visited her apartment to admire her artwork, if the only thing she had was a piece of bread, she would butter it and split it with the king without any fuss. She would pour tea in her mismatched teacups from the Soviet Union, some of them with the chips on their blue and golden rim, and the king would feel honored, as he should. To us, her apartment was a sanctuary. After the meal, we would sit on the couch where the calm and quiet would descend, surrounded by her amazing, outstanding, incredible works. It literally felt like we were in a museum, like we were transported to a different era. I never ever got tired of looking at her works, always finding something new and undiscovered in them. She never ever complained. Until recently, well or very well was her uniform answer to how are you questions. Being with her, around her, always lifted my spirits. It invariably made me realize how I should appreciate every moment, every musical note, every line of poetry, every stitch of her embroidery, every beautiful orchid that her green thumb made blossom. Because her quiet appreciation of life, not an easy life, but the life that was given to her, was so tangible. Now my aunt is gone. the oldest member of her generation of the Vainbergs-Trachtenbergs clan, has left this planet. For a brief moment, my Aunt Eugenia, Teta Musa, Queen Esther, made this world a better place. And this is what we're left with, this knowledge. Thank you.
Friends, I'm going to admit to you that I want to, something I didn't plan to do, but to reflect a little bit on what we have all experienced through the words of these 5 people. We all know something about the magic of art in its various forms. A few brush strokes, a cluster of musical notes, words, gestures on the stage can create and do magic. They can bring these raw elements, something to life about the depth of our lives. Eugenia's art contributed to that magic as we looked at her work and saw the depth below the surface, as it converged with the depth of Eugenia's character. I think you'll agree with me that the reflections by these 5 people have also created a bit of magic as well by bringing to life, through words and gestures, something of the complexity, the depth, the grandeur, the simplicity of a life well lived by a person of depth and character and love. I'm sure you'll agree with me that we have been privileged to experience the creation of this indelible portrait. O God of life, amid the ceaseless tides of change which sweep away the generations, your love remains to comfort us and to give us hope. Around us are life and death, decay and renewal, the flowing rhythm that all things obey. Our life is a dance to a song that we cannot hear. Its melody courses through us for a little while, then it seems to cease. Whence the melody and whither does it go? In darkness as in light, we turn to you, the source of life and the answer to all of life's mysteries. As you are able, I invite you now to rise for the El Mole Rachamim. El Mole Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShchina, Im Kadoshim Utahorim Kazohar Harakim Azhirim, Et Nishmat Esther Bat David Shahacha La'olama, Bala Rachamim Yastireh B'Seter Ganafav La'olamim, V'Yitzror B'Tzra Chayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata V'Tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava V'Nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Eugenia Vainberg, our loved one who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace, and let us say together, Amen. Will you please be seated? I want to announce that Eugenia's family will receive friends at the Suburban Temple, which is at 2241 Chagrin Boulevard, 2241 Chagrin Boulevard. They will receive friends today at the temple, Suburban Temple, from 4 in the afternoon until 6 o'clock. Our service will now continue at graveside at the Lakeview Cemetery. Once again, on behalf of the family, we so much appreciate your presence here with us this morning.
Friends, this concludes services here at the chapel. You may return to your cars. If you're driving to the cemetery, please put on your headlights and your flash.
Oh, no, this is Raymond. Oh, okay. That's the reason why I never could get. I know, that's the son. He's just going to suffer that one to go. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Rabbi Klein, that was just beautiful. Did she go out? How about this person? You want to go to the car?
No,
Go up a little further. Perfect.
oh, there she is. She must have gone to the car herself.
You go around the other side.
So I guess we didn't want to.
You go around the other side.
I'll go around this one. Is that good?
Go to the other side.
Help with the walker, I'll come back.
I know that too, but you know, we also have to, here, come on. We're gonna run out of time for stuff. I gotta leave for my service. Okay, we're gonna take that, set it on top of here. This? Yes, yeah. Come on. We're literally running out of time. I mean, we both have to, I have to leave for my service at 12. It is 12 now, probably. We have to move this now.
Got it?
Uh-huh. Okay.
Do you want me to move the beer?
Okay, no, what I want you to do is I want you to get the all this flour stuff up off the floor. Like even if you just grab a couple pieces, you know, grab all of them. Because I can't. There's one more right there to the right.
Sorry, I'm trying to do the best I can.
No, I understand.
As quick as I can.
We all are because we're on a time crunch. Okay. Get up the ones over here on this side. Okay. I forgot I didn't have to blow out the stupid candles.
All right, try to double check, make sure this is good.
Yep, make sure that's all clean and back organized. Ryan, come on.
Hey, I gotta load my car.
All right, well, you got help here, so
That's what I'm doing. I'm loading.
he's here.